Hey, 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 hello, greetings and welcome. Welcome to our first lesson of the evolution unit, evolution number 1. Now, here's our agenda. It's kind of like a note and an agenda all combined together. We can call it a note agenda. So, what are we going to learn about today? Well, the key points we're going to learn about is really this: organisms vary, so they are different within a species, some taller, some shorter. You get the picture. And this variation allows the species or organisms to adapt to things as they come up. What are the key terms we're going to learn about? Extinction, adaptation, mimicry, variation, mutation, and selective advantage. Okay, we got 4 learning points on the agenda. We got adapt or die. What does that mean? Well, organisms have to adapt. These are some of the ways in which they adapt. I will talk about that later. A spotted moth, my dear. It's actually the peppered moth, and we're going to learn about a real-life example of organisms that have adapted to their environments. Mutants, not the fun X-Men kind, but still pretty cool. We're going to learn about mutants and mutations. And then the last thing, because we don't have enough to worry about these days, antibiotic-resistant bacteria. And wow, there's a little explanation about what happens there. So, we have a special guest today. Look, it's the owl. You might recognize him from the Kahoot logo. So, without further ado, let's get right into the lesson. See you on the other side. OMG, people. See you on the other side. You see what I did? I turned the camera around, and now it's facing the other way. I got my little selfie stick, which allows me to walk around because, you know me, I can't really stay in one place when I'm talking. And I might be periodically ripping my glasses off to make a point and then losing them. And as you can see, I'm in a larger outdoor space, so that might present a bit of a problem. Oh, this is pretty cool. This is actually, those of you who are Gen Xers like me might recognize this as a scene from a music video. We are mature children. It's a really good song called Whisper to a Scream. I just got dizzy, and let's get cracking. Let's get to work. All right, so adapt or die. First concept we're going to learn about is adaptation. And organisms adapt. Really, we just need to think of some examples of how they adapt in the environment and be able to share those, be able to explain them. So 3 examples I'm going to delve down on, and if you play video games at all, if you're a gamer, you might recognize some of these things as strategies that you use yourself to adapt and survive in the game. Camouflage, stealth, and mimicry. Okay, so camouflage. Do I need to tell you what that means? I guess I'll tell you. It means just hiding, mixing in, fitting in with the environment. So what's the difference between camouflage and stealth? Well, really, it's the purpose of camouflage. No one can see you, so you can hide and not be eaten. Stealth, no one can see you, so you can hide and sneak up on something and eat it. So basically 2 sides of the same coin. Some animals have both of those sides. The snowy owl is snowy. It lives in snow. It's white. It can camouflage itself in the snow, but it also has these soft wingtips, which allow it to sneak up on its prey, which is kind of cool. Stealth, camouflage, and mimicry. Good example of mimicry, my favorite example of mimicry, is the imperial butterfly, which looks a lot like the monarch butterfly. Imperial, monarch, both words for kings or royalty. And they look a lot alike. Monarch butterfly, kind of poisonous. Imperial butterfly, not poisonous at all. But guess what? The birds don't want to take a chance, so they don't eat either. Mimicry at work. Okay, speaking of moths or butterflies, they're actually in the same family. The spotted moth, my dear. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story. And unlike a lot of stories I tell you, this one's actually going to be true. And it's a story about a moth that lives in England. It still does live in England, and it's actually called the peppered moth. I just said a spotted moth, my dear, because it was like a spot of tea, my dear. I was trying to be clever. I don't know how well that worked. So variation in the peppered moth color in England is something that happened, and basically this is an example of adaptation to pollution. So basically the population changed color in response to industrial pollution. So you had these peppered moths. All right, it's a little bit hard to explain. Take a little bit of time to think about this. So you have these peppered moths. Now the ones that have like a peppery coloring, they look good. They can kind of blend in really nice on a birch bark, but If they are darker, they basically show up really easily. Throw in pollution. Now, within the population, you had variation. See how I'm using that key term there? So you had variation, you had different species, different organisms within the same species who looked different. Some were better camouflaged on a light background, some were better camouflaged on a dark background. Why the darker ones survived? Well, just because there was variation. They just made it, even though it was harder for them to survive with the birds eating them all the time. And then the Industrial Revolution hit. People started burning coal like crazy. All the buildings got really dark from all the soot. And all of a sudden, those insects, those spotted moths, had an advantage that were darker. And the population shifted. And guess what? They started burning coal. They stopped burning coal, I should say. And the population shifted back again. So basically, you see the population adapting or responding to the environment. Now, this is just one concept I have to drive in on you. And I'm not going to drive in on it too hard because it's sort of esoteric. It's a little bit obscure, but populations evolve, not individuals. Okay, so let's just remember that. If there's variation in a population, over time, that population gradually changes. So you see, as with the peppered moth, a change overall in the population where you go from most of them being light to most of them being dark and then back to most of them being light. That is adaptation at its finest. Now, where does the variation come from? Well, that's the next thing. Mutation. So when we hear the word mutants, I don't know, either we hear like maybe it's going to give you some sort of special powers, like you shoot rays out of your eyes, or mostly that's not true. Like radiation does mutate your genes, but it gives you the special powers of having leukemia. And I don't mean to jest about that, but it does cause cancer. Mostly it doesn't make you super powered. I believe that the radiation would have killed the spider. If the radiation didn't kill the spider, then the radioactive spider should have killed Spider-Man. But we've all seen the memes. You know where I'm going with that. Let's talk a little bit about this. So what is mutation? So you have these changes in DNA, and the changes are stochastic. Fancy word. Random. Not such a fancy word. They just happen. There's all sorts of things in the environment that cause mutations. Most mutations, or many mutations, don't even show up. They don't really change an individual. Some mutations have no real particular effect. Blue eyes is a mutation. Doesn't really hurt you, doesn't really help you. Some mutations, though, are special. Sometimes there's a change, and it makes you have an advantage over the other organisms. It's almost like an advantage that would allow nature to select you over other organisms. We call that kind of advantage a selective advantage. Makes sense? So you can have mutations leading to variation, and sometimes that mutation gives you a selective advantage, gives you an advantage over other organisms. Sometimes the selective advantage is not so good for us. And this is where we get to our last agenda point for the day. The last thing you're going to be learning about is antibiotic-resistant bacteria. So let's go back to this idea. We have variation within a population. Now let's imagine that this population is a population of bacteria that are making you sick. Okay, so the doctor gives you antibiotics. These are medicines that kill the bacteria. Now, because there's variation within the population, not every bacteria is going to be affected in the same way by the medication. Some are tougher and survive longer. So what do you need to do? You need to take all your antibiotics. I mean, I told you about this before. What happens if you don't? You are breeding antibiotic-resistant bacteria in your body. How? Well, let me explain. When you kill off all the bacteria that are susceptible to the antibiotics, that's the ones that get killed by it, then what are you left over with? You're left over with all the bacteria that were a lot harder to kill. So what have you done? You've basically created a tougher population. So maybe bring out a tougher antibiotic. And then you can winnow it down even further so that you only have the weakest bacteria, or the weaker bacteria are getting killed off and the stronger survive. So this is a little experiment in evolution, but it's not really a good one for us because the end result is you wind up with bacteria that are resistant to every antibiotic that we can produce. And you wind up essentially farming them, like reproducing them at a greater rate than the other organisms. And this is something that's a huge problem. So, what are we going to do? Well, we're not going to solve the problem of antibiotic-resistant bacteria today, but we can definitely do some homework. So what's your homework? Well, it's simple. I like to keep it simple. 2 things. 1, I want you to observe variation in animals. And I want you to ask yourself the question over and over again. How is this animal different from that animal? How is this plant different from that plant? And the second question, how does that variation give that organism an advantage? Good. Thing number 1. Thing number 2, I would like you to at a drug company. That means like send them a message on Twitter or Instagram or anything, and ask them a simple question. Ask them what they are doing to prepare to protect the world against antibiotic-resistant bacteria, because we should always have a plan to be prepared. Don't you think? Good. I agree. So have a wonderful, wonderful day. I'll see you for lesson 2 very shortly. And check out the... Oh, getting real close here. Check out the... What's the word I'm thinking of? Oh, yeah. Agenda. In the notes. Underneath. There'll be a link to the agenda and the notes and the homework. And do it all. And please comment down below with what you've discovered, i.e. answer your homework questions down below. And have a wonderful, wonderful day. Mr. Plus out.